Hi, and welcome to this Orlando Shake special presentation on Facebook Live and YouTube, our live streamed Q&A with the creative team of Intimate Apparel. I'm Jim Helsinger, Artistic Director here at Orlando Shakes, and tonight we want you to sit back, relax, and learn about the people behind the scenes of our latest production this season of Intimate Apparel, which kicks off tomorrow night, our opening night in the Murchison Theater. Also, we'd love for you to join our conversation from wherever you are. So please leave your questions about the production in the comments section, and we'll try to get to as many as we can while we're talking. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the creative team of Intimate Apparel. Joining me tonight for this presentation are some amazingly talented individuals. First, the director of Intimate Apparel. Please welcome Sean McLeod to the room. Welcome, Sean.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Next, let me introduce our costume designer. Please welcome Dana Rebecca Woods to the show. Welcome, Dana.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Let's welcome our scenic and lighting designer doing double duty, Stephen Jones.
It's a pleasure.
Nice to have you here, Stephen. And finally, let's welcome to the screen our intimacy coordinator, Karen Gilmer.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Welcome, Karen. It's a thrill. Thanks for taking time out of a busy tech and dress rehearsal schedule to be. We have a preview tonight starting in only an hour and a half. So it's been a busy day today. Thanks for giving some time to be on Facebook Live. Sean, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll ask some questions of everybody. For our audience, Intimate Apparel, what is it? What does it mean? Why should I come to this play? What's the plot? Just give us the quick 1 minute. What's this play's about?
All right, so Intimate Apparel. Intimate Apparel is a story of a Black seamstress in New York. The story rather centers around her, around Esther. The fabrics that she makes, the clothing that she makes, rather, and the fabrics that she weaves, instance of metaphorically, the fabrics that she weaves that connects her to the other characters in the story. So what's really fun and exciting is she's this unattached woman, very hardworking, and then she gets a letter from a man in Panama who's interested in her, and her life changes all in an instant. So we get to see this exciting story unfold, and her life in so many ways begin to unravel as she engages in courtship from back in the day, 1905, in courtship, and then marriage to this man in Panama. So really exciting story with themes of betrayal. You have hope, you have love, you have betrayal, but ultimately, I think it's identity and self-awareness and self-love.
Great. So she receives a letter from someone in Panama, a guy that's working on the Panama Canal, building it at the time, I think, right?
Right.
And then she starts writing back to him as well. Is that? And they're doing a love letter back and forth thing.
Yeah, they're doing letters back and forth. So they're. Back in the day, we didn't have texting and phone calls. And so this was pre-online dating. So this is their version of that. So they're writing letters back and forth, and more they're falling in love with the words and with how they describe each other. Back in the day, that was the thing that how that happened. But so they're writing letters back and forth, falling more and more deeper in love with the other person until there's a proposal, and here we are.
Right. And then so that people know it's not just all happy, falling in love via letters, but then once they actually meet, they're really very different people than they've described themselves as. It's Match.com when you actually meet the person.
Exactly. You actually meet the person, and then it's a catfish.
So in Act 1, they're writing letters, and in Act 2, they meet each other. And that was a picture we just saw of them talking to each other once they've actually met each other. And so there's a lot of plot. And as you said, there's laughter, there's love, there's betrayal, terrible betrayal. That also is a part of the story. So it's a very complex story. Is it a romance? Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? What are people going to expect? Why should I come? What am I going to see that makes me want to go to the theater tonight?
I would say it's a buffet. It's a little bit of everything. Some people will watch it and think and feel that it's a drama, and in many ways it is that, because we go on this journey with Esther. We feel her love when we feel her love, and we feel her pain when that love is not reciprocated. So it's a bit of all of that, and then we also have those moments of levity where we're able to laugh and just go on this journey um and have and have these connections with these characters and go on the journey with them. So it's a little bit of everything, and I think that's what makes it exciting and gripping. Keeps you on the edge of your seat because you're wondering what happens next. Is she really gonna go through with this? But she went through with it, but now what? And then now what? Well, wait. So it's really exciting to see the story unfold. We also incorporate really cool scenic elements that assist our storytelling and makes it really exciting for the audience as well.
So that's a little look on our stage. We're looking, I think, from the back of the scenery at something right now. You want to describe a little bit the turntable or the trap, or what happens on stage that we see?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in order to better serve the text and to allow Esther to move fluidly between the different characters that she interacts with, we utilize the turntable, the revolve, and that takes us from Esther to Mrs. Van Buren to Mamie. So we're able to just see that happen fluidly. But it's also really exciting to see the stories unfold on the upstage on that revolve as it's moving, because it tells us a little bit about just who these characters are like when we might not necessarily be hearing them speak. So it adds an element to the show that I think layers in a little bit more subtext and allows the audience to really buy into the journey.
Sure. I think I'm going to come back probably to a few of those images when we talk to Stephen Jones, the set and lighting designer. But let's talk about the characters and the cast a little bit. Now, we already talked about Esther, who is the seamstress, played by Lillian Oben, and George, who is the guy from Panama, right? George Armstrong, who's played by Chris Lindsay. Who else is in the cast, and what are they playing, the other characters that are in the play?
Yeah. So what's fun? You have Esther receiving these letters from the man in Panama, from George, played by Chris Lindsay. But then you also have this romance between Esther and Mr. Marks, played by Adam Biner. Mr. Marks, he sells fabric. He's a Romanian Jewish man selling fabric out of his tenement apartment that also works as his fabric shop. But you get to see this connection that Marks and Esther have between one another, and it's this forbidden love. So it's you see the way that they both regale in the fabrics together, and then into each other's eyes. So there's so much that's said that is unsaid, but also is said through the actions and through the tension between the two of them, because you really want them to get together. You just see all the chemistry. So that's Marks. We also have Mamie, played by Martine Fleurisma. Mamie is Esther's her best friend, almost like her sister. Mamie is also a prostitute, and what adds to that is that Esther makes clothing for women of all social classes, not just the rich white woman, which is Mrs. Van Buren. She also makes clothing for the Black prostitute, and she doesn't treat them any differently. She actually treats her like a sister.
No, in fact,
So there's
she makes the same piece of clothing for both of them. Right?
yeah,
Actually, matching clothing.
yeah. She doesn't shortchange Mamie at all. She makes the exact same corset, and we see this sisterly bond between the two of them. But then also we see what happens when things do not necessarily work out so well between them because of a bit of a love triangle between Mamie, Esther, and George. So there's that. And then Mrs. Van Buren. So Esther also makes corsets for women of high society, and Mrs. Van Buren is played by our very own Laurel Hatfield. And Laurel, and seeing the chemistry between Mrs. Van Buren and Esther is really exciting to watch on stage, because Mrs. Van Buren is high society woman who's kind of been forgotten by her husband, and she's left craving intimacy, craving connection, and she finds that in Esther. But that connection and the intimacy that they experience is misunderstood on Mrs. Van Buren's part, and we get to see how that unfolds as well, which is really exciting and gripping to watch. And then we also have the mother hen of the rooming house, which is Mrs. Dixon, played by Trenell. And Miss Trenell is just a joy to watch, Trenell Mooring, and we get to see, really twofold with Mrs. Dixon, because she comes out and she's a bit of that comic relief, and we laugh with her, but then we get a little taste of who she was, what her story was before she was the mother hen of the roomy house. And it opens our hearts, and it
Mm.
also makes us more self-aware of um, those in our lives that we connect to in such a way, and the stories that they've told and how that shapes who we are as well.
Yeah, we have a wonderful group of all professional actors, both who've been on our stages before. Trenell was just in Midsummer Night's Dream this spring, who are local actors that live in Orlando, and then also actors from out of town, from New York, coming in and joining our cast in Lillian and Martine. So it's a really great blend of professional local actors and those that are from out of town as well. Now, one of the things that Sean was mentioning was all this love in the play. We have the love letters. We have love
Mm,
between George and Esther. We have a prostitute who's experiencing a different type of love. Van Buren, who is her husband doesn't seem to love her. She has a lack of love,
mm.
and all of that is intimate. So I want to bring Karen on for a moment and talk about an intimacy coordinator and what it does. This is a fairly new position in the theater, the intimacy coordinator. It's something new to theater people and probably not known at all to our audiences. So, what's an intimacy coordinator and what do you do?
Well, first thing I do is I create a culture of consent in the rehearsal room, in the production for everyone. And so, if there's any touching in a play or a musical, I make sure that the actors give consent to be touched on their bodies for that day. Intimacy directing and fight directing are similar, but the difference between intimacy directing and fight directing is that performers' boundaries change. One day, maybe the wrist is fine to touch, and maybe the next day it isn't. And so this position came out of a need for advocacy for consent among performers and directors to for the performers to say, "Hey, yes, I do agree to do this heightened physical activity," or "No, I don't, but I will consent to do this." So just making sure everybody is comfortable and taking care of their well-being and the well-being of their partners and everybody in the rehearsal room when it comes to intimacy, and that includes nudity and any sort of sexual assault, anything like that.
I think using the metaphor of the fight choreographer is really great, Karen, because I think we can understand that if two people are going to whack swords against each other, we have to choreograph that out. You can't just say, now take your sword and go attack the other actor. That would be dangerous. And yet, for many decades, when two actors have to kiss on the stage, they weren't told how to kiss, when to kiss, open mouth, closed mouth, whether they need a breath mint or anything until the term and role of the intimacy coordinator came along. As far as our play, Intimate Apparel, give us an example of a moment that needed coordination and what the tricky part was, because we have two characters who get on a bed and start to have sex together. They don't finish that act, but they begin it. We have some kissing. What's an example of take us through a moment in the play and what you did?
Well, I'll talk about one of the first moments in the play was the scene between the misunderstanding in the intimacy and the kiss on Mrs. Van Buren's part towards Esther. And it had to be very clear that Mrs. Van Buren initiated the kiss, and Esther for a minute gives in to the kiss but then pulls away. So we had to be very clear in that scene who starts it and
Mm-hmm.
who pulls away. And before you can do any intimacy, I always use placeholders. So, and using the hand to actually sort of work out where the face is and where the lips are going to go, who's going to initiate contact, who's going to open distance, who's going to close distance. And by using the hand, you work out a lot of the physicality. And so by the time that both performers give consent to actually do the kiss, it's actually already worked out in the hands, and you just move it, closing distance, with the faces. So for me, I wanted to keep that sort of tension, but yet the given on Esther's part, into keep that in the scene. So I was very conscious of the body language and the giving of energy and the receiving of energy between the two actresses. And that's part of intimacy directing, is the giving and receiving of energy and using gravity, and actually desexualizing the language, which is where the choreography comes into praise. We call it a hug is an embrace. We use placeholders in cases where a kiss, the two performers have not given consent for a kiss. So we have come up with a system for it to be less weird, and to the choreography remains where the emotion and boundaries may change.
I think you said that just right. I mean, as an actor, many times, the woman I dated and became my wife, I was supposed to kiss her in a number of plays, and there was kind of a, well, are we going to talk about this? Are we going to work this out as we would fight choreography? Is now a regular part of the theater again, a regular part of what we're doing. We are doing a play called Intimate Apparel, which has intimacy in it, and we were just talking to the intimacy coordinator. Let's talk about the apparel part, and bring Dana Rebecca Woods on, who is our costume designer, because after it all is intimate apparel, most of all ladies' corsets. And tell us a little bit about the costumes. Dana, what's it like to create something this is in 1903, I think, 1905. What's it like to create period costumes for a piece like this? Oh, Dana, I think we have you on mute at the moment.
Sorry, it's very exciting. There's a lot of research involved. I spent a lot of time at the Met Museum virtually looking at the corsets that they have, and looking at the construction and trying to figure out which style would work for each character and each circumstance in the play.
So I'm going to guess that most of the women who are watching this actually know what a corset is, and most of the men may not even know. This predates the bra. What is a corset? What does it do? Is it comfortable? Is it painful? Is it beautiful? What are we actually really talking about?
A corset, yes, it predates the bra. It is an undergarment, not meant to be seen as an outer garment, although it was in certain circumstances. Usually in a brothel, or perhaps in a saloon, a dance hall, that type of place. It was worn over a chemise. A chemise is a lightweight sort of camisole, so to speak. And then there were something called pantalettes. The pantalettes were worn underneath the corset. And then over that, you wore a petticoat. And sometimes there was 1, 2, or 3 petticoats. And then you put on a corset cover, which went on top of the corset and the chemise. And then after that, you put on your dress, or your shirtwaist and your skirt.
So we can see several examples here of the corsets that appear in the play at different times, which Esther is making for these different people. One she's wearing herself on her wedding night, one she made for Mrs. Van Buren, and then one with her friend here. This is a photo of her with other fabric, with Mr. Marks, who sells fabric that she's getting to be the top of lace part of a corset.
And
go ahead.
Corsets were laced rather tightly. I think everybody remembers that scene in Gone with the Wind where the main character is being laced, and the laces are being pulled very tightly, and she wants to have the smallest waist possible. And around the turn of the century, where we are, women decided that it wasn't really fashionable to faint from the tightness of your corset anymore. So corsets started being designed with the thought that they were going to be more medicinally helpful to women's health. And the pigeon breast, which was something that was worn a lot in this period, was supposed to be something that was would open up the lungs, push back the hips, and give women a better way of breathing as they walked and wore their corsets during the day.
I hear you. My wife has told me how uncomfortable they can be, but they cinch the waist end, as you said in Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
She's like, you're going to be 18 inches, which is ridiculously small.
Yes, and there's a lot of people who still wear corsets, and they do cinch themselves that tightly.
Sure. Let's move over to sets and lighting a little bit. And also, Michael, if you have a question, you want to run it across the bottom of the screen here, we'll try to answer those as well. Let's talk about the set itself and bring Stephen Jones on. So we talked a little bit about this rotating turntable. What's unique about this set and what's interesting about it?
I think what's interesting about this is really in the staging of the play, and the environment has been created to allow for a seamless concession of Esther as she moves from really 5 different locations, her house or her apartment, to the small intimate space that is Mr. Marks, who sells her garments. She then goes to the lavish location, which is Mrs. Van Buren, that's easy for me to say. And then she goes to Mamie's, right? Here's an example of Esther's. Then she goes to the saloon, the seedy saloon of Mamie. And as well as we have, and there's an example of Mamie's. And then we also have, the representation of George, especially in Act 1, as he's in Panama. And so the challenge, the fun, the enjoyment really has been in how do we give these suggestions, but allow the play, the text, the language, and our characters, our actors, to seamlessly flow into these locations and keep us as an audience engaged and entertained and on the edge of our seats for the scenes that are going to take place that are up and coming.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of the play is that it goes to all these locations time after time after time and place after place after place. And we don't want the stage to go black for 20 seconds while we prep it and then come up, for it to be continuous, for the storytelling to keep going. So, for example, for our audiences that come see the play, there's a really nice moment where Lillian, the lead, has to go off and change and come back. And while she's changing, we watch the carousel go past every one of the different rooms and what people are doing at that time in every one of them. So you can go, oh, this is the whole picture of what we're thinking about Esther and everybody else in the play. And then we're headed to the next scene as it's coming in. So there's been a lot of exploration on how to tell this story in a way that's continuously fluid. Is there anything in the lighting about it? Because you're both set and the lighting designer of the play, which is rare. I mean, that combination isn't happening all that much. About this play or the lighting in this play that is playing into what the audience should be looking for.
You know, yes, I will say it this way. I think from a lighting standpoint, the feeling, the quality of light changes as we move from one location to the next. One in particular that I think is really enjoyable to consider is actually the transitions from Esther, for example, into Mamie, which I'm particularly proud of, actually, in terms of the dingy, dark quality of light in Mamie's space and how that differs, and really every light for every play, hopefully, is specifically mapped out in a way that is specific. But the shadows in Mamie's is very specific. And we've spent several days actually adjusting the light as the actors are getting comfortable in the space and as we're really settling in and it's getting its legs, to make sure that when Mamie makes a cross down left, we still have that quality of seediness, that quality that speaks to her character and who she is, as opposed to just bringing up light so that we can all see that light has a poetry to it that speaks to the character.
Sure, thank you. We just had everybody on the screen. I'm going to ask that they all come back because I want to do the lightning round, which is for each one of you, if you just had one thing to tell an audience member before they came to see the show that watched this Facebook Live, that would be either a good thing to know before the play begins or a secret that only they know? What's one thing that if you were coming with a friend, you'd say, watch for this moment, or you need to know that? What's just one thing from your perspective? Sean, let's start with you.
And I will unmute.
Yeah.
So I would say the one thing to watch for that's really exciting, one of my favorite moments, is the love story between the unexpected love story that happens between Esther and Mr. Marks. I think that's one of the really delightful moments within the show that is very unexpected, but we see it coming. So I would say look out for that. It's gonna make you smile, and it might make you cry a little bit too. I know I tear up a little bit, but really sweet moments between them, really delightful.
Karen, what's one thing you'd like to tell audiences?
I enjoy Dana's design in the costumes and how costumes and touch collaborate, and her wonderful choice of fabric, and really letting that aspect of the intimacy of the touching of the fabric and of the touching of the characters, and also in relate to the smoothness and the beauty of the fabric in the costumes.
Great. And Dana, that's a segue to you.
Thank you, Karen. That was very nice. I agree with Sean. My favorite part of this whole production is the love story between Mr. Marks and Esther. And I'm hoping someone writes a part 2.
The back end of the story. And Stephen?
The thing I would say is relish the text, and which we do naturally anyway. But every night I'm finding new truths in the poetry that our playwright has created between all of these characters, and the almost romances, and the energy and the tension between those. It's something that, as an audience member, I would want to come back to this play again and again, because it's something that I think you're going to find new discoveries every time you see it.
One person that's not on this call who I wish is our playwright, Lynn Nottage. She's a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, and the poetry in this play, that's my favorite part of it. From the letters from Panama are full of such beautiful imagery. And then she's really meticulous about the time period and terms. So I want to give the audience one, and then I want to ask Sean about one as we close out. There's one line at one point where you say, Mrs. Van Buren, in a kind of cut, saying that this corset makes me look like I'm a tart in the Tenderloin. And some people may or may not know the Tenderloin was an area in New York that was full of whorehouses. And that has now become a term in many cities. San Francisco has a Tenderloin, for example. So if you hear that, you don't know that term, she's saying, I look like a whore in the red light district. And then Sean, I wanted to come back. A term that comes up a couple times is a duppy. It's right at the end. And I think it's one that our audiences wouldn't know, that if you watch Facebook, you go, I know what that word means. Can you take us through how it's used in the show?
Yeah, so a duppy. Well, what a duppy is a bad spirit, like a evil spirit. Happy Halloween, boo. But that's what a duppy is. So it's used in the text, in the storytelling, where George, he tells Esther, it looks like you've seen a duppy. So in the sense of, looks like you saw a ghost, that look in your face. And then it's also used in a different context when Esther tells Mamie that he's a duppy, he's a spirit, so that he's a bad spirit, he's this phantom ghost that is just going to keep haunting you and haunting myself. So that's what a duppy is.
So if you are watching the show and you watch Facebook Live, you can turn to your friend and go, oh, are you wondering what this means? Because I want to thank all of our guests for being with us on Facebook Live. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the preview tonight. And for our audiences, just some wrapping up information. Intimate Apparel is in previews right now. It opens tomorrow night, Friday night. It runs until November 20th. You can order your tickets at orlandoshakes.org. We're live 24/7 on the web. You can get your tickets anytime you want. We really want to thank Orange County government and their Arts and Cultural Affairs program for their support of this production. We have, if you are coming tomorrow night for the opening, we do have another in-person pre-show tomorrow night on the 29th at 6:30 before the show starts at 7:30. And then some other things. We are still in a COVID situation here, so please remember to bring your face mask with you. It is a city ordinance, a city rule that you have to wear a mask in a city building, and we're a city building, so audiences will be wearing masks. And then also you need to bring with you a negative COVID test result taken within 72 hours before the show. Bring that with you. We'll check it in the right before you come in at the door. And if you are vaccinated, you can use that in lieu of a 72-hour test. So bring your test and your mask. And if you have it on your phone, that's fine. You don't have to have the physical copy. And we'll welcome you to Intimate Apparel, a comedy, a romance, and a drama with a lot of beautiful underwear in it. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. And have a great night. We'll see you all later.